Hey, what's going on, folks? It's Mike here, and welcome to the next lesson in the D programming language series. In this lesson, we're going to be taking a look at the standard library to work with JSON data. Now, previously, if you've been watching these lessons and have been subscribed, then you've seen that we've been looking at reading and writing files in the past few lessons. So I want to just show you something that's pragmatic in the D programming language for reading JSON. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look. So from the standard library Phobos, we're going to go ahead and take a look. So in order to get to the standard library, let's go to documentation, library reference, and again, we'll find the Phobos runtime library. So if we scroll down here, we'll find a few different data formats that the D language works with nicely. And in this one, we'll cover JSON. If you want to see some of the other ones, then let me know and we'll go ahead and cover those. But let's just go ahead and start with JSON here. So we can see from the top, we've got the standard library here for JSON. And we've got a few examples here, and I'll go ahead and show us how to work with this in an example. But the key thing is we're going to need some sort of data here to work with. And from this example, we can go ahead and just start with something here for working with JSON. And that's basically this sort of curly brace language here that consists of a key and a value. If you're not familiar with JSON, you can usually figure it out. I'm going to go ahead and give us another example that I've prepared here that I think will make it a little bit easier to work with JSON. So let's go ahead and make this a little bit larger for you. And I'm going to go ahead and just open some data here. Now, again, you can work with whatever data you want here, but this is just in my data file here. And you'll see how this is sort of structured here. And again, formatting really helps here when trying to understand your data. So, give yourself some room here to format your actual code here. But basically what this has is, again, some sort of key here, cars, and then within the curly brace here, so let's go ahead and highlight that, we have the different models of cars, and within those models of cars, we have the different information describing the actual model, or I should rather say we have the companies and then the model of cars within those companies, and then maybe some attributes here. And we can keep nesting data as we need. So JSON is this sort of structured data format for storing data. It's used all over the web and other places, for instance. So let's go ahead and try to understand just how to parse this using, again, the D language. So what I can do is just go ahead and import the standard JSON library as we have previously seen. That's what the library that we need. Now, what we're actually going to be parsing is a string. So we need to load up this file here. And in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and use auto file, or let's just call it my file here. And let's go ahead and load this file, which is in the current directory, again, using a relative file path. And let's go ahead and see what happens here as far as how we can get the contents of this file. So again, what we could do here from the previous lessons is to sort of open up the file, read through, and append to some sort of string. And that's a pattern that we could use, but I'm going to go ahead and show you something else that you'll occasionally see in the documentation or searching around. And I like using this pattern that I found here, where I get the JSON contents. And basically, I'm going to look at my file. And let's go ahead and open up from Dlang here. And let's look at the library reference. Let's go ahead and look at file. And what we go ahead and do is find some of my functions. Actually, I want standard IO here. Let's go ahead and open this. And what I can do when actually reading this file here, let's go ahead and look at by line here as an example here. And basically what by line is going to do here is help us read this file by line here. And we can kind of read through here. The element type for this range is going to give us a character string here. And it's essentially going to read from the file handle one at a time here. Okay, so that's the tool that we're going to need here. So by line here. And let's go ahead and try to compile this much so far and see if we need some more here. And it looks so far so good here. Let's go ahead and just try to write line and see our JSON contents. Let's see what we actually get back here. And it looks like we are in fact getting a string. Now there's another little trick here because this isn't very readable here, where we can use something called a joiner here, which we haven't covered here. And we can sort of join based off of the end line character. Let's go ahead and try this, and then we'll have to find out where joiner is here. And it's giving us a little hint here that we need the standard algorithm library, which we've yet to dive into in this series, as we're taking a brief aside into working with some data here. But now we've actually got our file read in here. And if I scroll up, you can see it's matching the actual data file we have. So that's very nice here. So now we have this string that we can work with in our JSON here. But how do we access the actual contents here? Well, this is where we need to start using some of the JSON library here. So let's go ahead and open this up here and see some of the functions that we have. And since we know we've got JSON data here, it looks like parse JSON is going to be useful. Now, of course, we can go to JSON here, but let's go ahead and see parse JSON. So essentially, this looks like what we're going to do is take in T here, which is our JSON formatted string to parse. So that's the type here. And I've got some other parameters here that we can set here. For instance, the maximum depth if we want to. Again, depends on your configuration files. I'm just going to take the defaults here, and then maybe other options here for how we want to actually encode the data that we're read in. But let's just go ahead and parse this here. So again, auto, and then the convention I've seen sometimes in the documentation is just to use J, which is, you know, probably not the best name here. But let's parse the JSON here, the JSON contents. In fact, let's go ahead and, well, we'll rename this in a moment here, but let's go ahead and see if it works. It looks like it's working, and looks like it is writing out the data. And I'm going to go ahead and comment that out just so we don't print out every time the JSON contents. We can, again, see them here. So what I'm going to do now is, again, show you the type here, which, again, we don't want to forget about this technique here. The type ID of J here. Now let's see what actual object that we got back here. So this is a JSON value here. So let's go ahead and explore JSON value in our documentation here. And that is some structure here where we've got some values here that we can work with. And we can see how we're actually using this particular value here. That it's essentially turned this into a what I would call a dictionary like we have seen before, or an associative array, where we're able to retrieve some of the values here. So let's just go ahead and try to write out some of the values here, and then it's sort of up to you with what you want to do with this information regarding what to parse here. If I do J, let's go ahead and say cars. And maybe we want a specific automaker, Nissan I will choose since it's the first one that I see. And let's go ahead and try to write this out here. And now we can see we're getting all the Nissans here that have the particular attributes, for example, the model, the doors, and so on here. Okay, so we can see the Sentra, Maxima, and the Skyline here. And of course, let's go ahead and get a particular model. How about the Skyline? And I'll go ahead and just write that out. And let's see here. It looks like we got an error because I've done this essentially backwards, right? I need the actual Nissan. Let's go ahead and say the model. Okay, so let's just kind of keep working through here. And looks like I got another error here. Well, again, this has to do with our JSON format. So again, see where I have the brackets here. And if I just want the first entry here, let's again think about this data. And this is, again, just goes to having some knowledge about JSON, I suppose, that this is actually an array that we can index into here. So let's just go ahead and pop in a 0 here. And that should give us our actual type here. So let's go ahead and do this example and play around with things here just a little bit here. Let's try to iterate through this actual JSON data here. And again, we've just got to sort of take in mind some of the previous lessons that we've learned about with associative arrays and how to do that with our for each loop here. So let's go ahead and say for each of our entries, and let's go ahead and say in our data here, cars for Nissan, and let's go ahead and write out each of the entries, and let's go ahead and see if this in fact indexes into our data. So I'll go ahead and clear this out. Let's go ahead and give this a run here. Oops, I've got to go ahead and compile this. And yet another error here. Cannot infer argument types here. And usually the little trick that we want here is for our JSON data. And again, let me try to show you here. Because we've got our JSON value here. Now, I guess there's not a great showing here, but usually we want to just convert it to an array if we want to look at all the different keys here. So there we are here. So now we can see the Sentra, Maxima, Skyline, and then the Sentra I'll comment this out here just so we don't get confused with what we are iterating through. That will give us all the values as an array here. And it might be worth actually looking here. Right line, the type ID of each of these entries. Again, sometimes it's useful just to see the type here for these things. Again, this is just another JSON value here for each of these entries here. That, again, you could run parse if you have a chunk of data. So anyways, that's how you can work with some of the pieces of the JSON data. I think the last thing to do here is perhaps to, instead of just writing out this line here, let's actually change it here. Again, we'll have to just kind of finagle through it, but we're going to get the 0th entry. And then let's actually change the model here. Let's go ahead and say the model is, and I'm just going to go ahead and put in all caps here, Centra, and let's go ahead and see if that change is reflected. And in fact, it is here. Okay, so let's just go ahead and label that as writing a new value, reading an array of entries, and then parsing our file. Okay, so that's it. That's all there is to the JSON data here. It's nice that it's built in so you have something that you can use. If you need something more extensive, you could probably search around for other libraries here. But again, it's just nice that it's built in, or that you at least have something that you can play around with immediately here. And we also learned some tricks for working with joining the data and so forth. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson here. I'll go ahead and wrap it up. If you want, you can find that lesson and all the other ones here on my website here and track your progress. And there you have it, folks. Just another cool tool in the D programming language built into the standard library. Again, most of the web and other applications often use JSON for transferring data. It's useful sometimes for serializing data as well, or deserializing data if you're passing data back and forth. That can be another strategy that you use. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed that. I'll look out for your comments in the discussion below, and see you next time.